want you to open up your Bibles to 1 Peter chapter 3, and we're going to continue our series tonight called Real Relationships, and we want to talk about how children change our lives. Now, some of you may be here and going, well, I don't have children. I want to suggest to you, you're thinking they have changed your life. You know, and there is a process by which God uses in all of our lives, and especially when it comes around to this thing called marriage and how children change our life. We go through different seasons in our lives, both personally and as families. Some months ago, we did a series called Seasons in Our Lives, and we explored what winter, spring, summer, and fall look like. Recognizing those seasons in our lives helps us negotiate the path we're walking down and prepare for what is coming next. Friends, every one of us do a lot better when we recognize the seasons that we're in. We're about ready to go into spring, physically speaking. And you are preparing your gardens, or you're preparing your lawn, or you're preparing because you know that a new season is coming on. And when you and I recognize that there are new seasons coming on, there's a good idea and a good reason for us to prepare for those seasons in our life. I learned another season of our lives that most people have, and that is a decadal review we all give ourselves. Now, universally, that's probably not true, but most of the time, we give ourselves a decadal review. And I find out it starts when we're 30. When we get to about 30, we start thinking, well, what did I do with this last decade of my life? 40 is a little more crucial. I didn't have a big, hard time with 40, but 50 was a big one. Not even thinking on 60, just hope I make it. And I think when you get to 70s, you don't care. The book's been written, so to speak. But we go through these times, and we start giving ourselves reviews. Often when we haven't accomplished our goals, we will give ourselves, now notice this, friends, a failing mark. We don't feel like we've accomplished everything that we should have. This same dynamic takes place in our families, that we have a tendency to go through seasons and fail to recognize those times, to recognize that this is going to be a shift now, that things are going to change. We want to focus on those family years. Today, whether we are married or single, whatever the case might be, we struggle with a lot of the same issues. That first season of our life is when two people fall in love and come together and decide marriage is for them. Most married couples in here, you went through that phase. The freedom they experience is enormous, but the money is poor. Remember those days? You had lots of energy, but you didn't have a lot of money. But there were, you could pretty much decide what you wanted to do. Then when the children start coming along, there's a huge wake-up call, isn't there? There's just a dynamic that starts taking place in our life. The attention and the energy that they gave to one another is now focused upon the child. I remember when our first was born, Wendy, when she came along. And I went up to, I was actually there during the birthing process, and I don't do well in those situations. As a matter of fact, our doctor looked up at me and he said, look, my hands are full, and if you're not going to make it, I suggest you get on the floor now, because I cannot take care of you. But I remember the next day when I went up and looked through the window and looked at Wendy, something exploded in my heart. I didn't know that there was that kind of love in the universe. I just didn't know what it felt like to be a parent and to love somebody with that kind of intensity. Then our family expanded, and we had Mary. I have to tell you this little story. Cheryl and I went to Grand Junction High School, and years ago, some friends invited us to a concert there where the Association was playing. Now, all you boomers know who the Association was. And so, one of their songs was Windy. Remember that? And who's walking down the streets of this? This is why I don't sing, but anyway. And then along comes Mary, And this couple turned to us almost simultaneously and said, you guys grew up in the 60s, didn't you? And you go, yeah, and that's why our kids came along. But you love somebody like your first child, and you just wonder when the second one comes along, is there room in your heart? And then that explosion takes place, and there's just all that kind of love that comes out. And then years later, we had John, and we knew our family was complete. But everything changed in our lives, and I mean from sleep. Remember those nights when you could just sleep through the night? You know, and now when you get older, there's other reasons why you can't sleep through the night. But, you know, right now it's like, you know, I don't remember this. I remember this conscious thought as soon as Cheryl had given delivery to Wendy. And I walked out of the delivery room and saw my mother, and I looked at her. I never told her thanks. But I was thinking, you did this for me? I mean, that's where I was as a parent. I didn't get it. I didn't know all the things that were coming down. I didn't realize all the ups and the downs that were going to take place in my life. I didn't get a handle on, you know, there are going to be some huge changes. There are going to be some real thrills, and then there's going to be some real chills. And then there's going to be some real joys, and then there's going to be some real agonies. But most of all, it's going to be great to have your kids around. And I can actually say that now that I'm at this end of it, that those were good times, but there were the ups and the downs that everybody has to go through. I really remember one of the things that changed my life, and just driving down the road one day. And I always prided myself in high school and college of having a very clean car. I loved a clean car. And I remember going down the street, and I think at that time we had a station wagon or something, and I smelled an odor in the car, and I thought, what in the world could that be? So I pulled over and looked in the back seat where, you know, our kids had been, and found French fries that I'm sure were 3 weeks old. You know, and you just realize, you look at those kind of things and you think, I never thought my life would be here. But it changes our life. When we go through different seasons, babies, children, adolescents, teenage years, sometimes we wonder if it will ever change. And then we wake up some morning and think it's already over. And where did the time go? And then if you're like me, you're thinking about grandchildren, and can we get the whole thing started again? You know, and that's just kind of the process in which life goes by. Peter writes to some people in the New Testament, and he's talking about marriage. And then he comes to this scripture in 1 Peter 3:8 that says this: finally, all of you live in harmony with one another. Be sympathetic, love as brothers, be compassionate and humble. So we want to talk about these areas in our life that change us, especially when children come along. If you have your little outlines, you want to follow along, let's take a look at 5 stabilizing factors for our family, regardless of where you may be. Number 1 is this: eliminate unwanted and unnecessary activities. I want to read to you Luke 10:41 and 42. It's not up on the screen, but let me read both of these. I just have the one verse up there, but let me read both of them to you. This is Jesus replying to Martha. And Martha is all flitter-pated because her sister isn't helping her. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Now notice this. You are upset with many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. The Lord is saying to Martha, she has too many things on her mind and needs to eliminate some clutter. We in the Western world have a mindset that life is all about doing and not about being. I was in a situation this week, and a man challenged me on this, and it was something that I really hadn't thought of. I mean, I'd thought of it, but not really in clear terms like he had presented to me in a question form. And he said, have you ever done a sermon on just being? I said, no. He said, well, I would challenge you to explore that. And he said, one of the ways that I always try to think about God is that when Moses was being sent to Pharaoh, and God was telling him, I want you to go set my people free, Moses asked the question to the Lord, well, who shall I say sent me? And he says, tell them, I am that I am. It's a statement of being. It's not a statement of doing. Now, I know that there's a balance in all of this, friends, but there is something that has to come around, and really, I am challenged with this. I mean, to the core of my being, because I don't know how to be. I just know how to do. I know how to do pastor work. I know how to do husband work. I know how to do father work. I know how to do, and a child of God. But I don't know how just to be. Just to be. I'm not a great observer in life, but once in a while when things come through and you hear enough statements, I get this aha moment and go, oh, maybe this could be God. And one statement that I hear from parents in our generation and what's being raised now is this one clear statement. I feel like I'm a taxi cab service. I feel like I just pick up my kids and I run to this place, and then I run to this place, and then I run to this place, and then I run to that place. And I just feel like my life is just being ran for me. That I'm just cluttered, that I just have so many things going on in my life. I'm just so busy. Years ago, when we kind of decided what kind of a church we were going to be, it automatically, without even thinking about it, we all automatically decided what kind of a church we wasn't going to be, or we weren't going to be. And friends, at some point, you and I have to come to a place and we've got to decide what kind of a family are we going to be. I mean, is the busyness in our life really honoring God? Or is the busyness in our life just because we're trying to keep pace with what's going on in society? We can become a river, and it doesn't matter if it's in our personal life or in our family life, but we can become a river that is a mile wide and an inch deep and has no impact anywhere. But God said, through Jesus here, you're going to be sliding to one side or the other. And you have to take a measurement in your own life, like I've had to take a measurement in my life, and we have to understand, am I more of the Martha type or am I more of the Mary type? Because actually, friends, all the activities that we do out here are going to pass away. But one thing's going to remain, and that's what we do on the inside. And sometimes I think we just have to sit around as a family and say, what are we going to be? And maybe even a more important question is what aren't we going to be? And just recognize that this is a place in a family's life that we have to come to of just being a family and cutting out issues or things in our life that just are not necessary. Why are you so quiet? It makes me really nervous and I preach longer. Number 2 is this: refuse to live vicariously through your children. Proverbs 22:6, train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it. Notice what Proverbs is saying. Train up a child in the way he should go, not where the parents want him to go. Now, I know I'm skating on thin ice here. The word train is used here, and it is meant to bend gently to help grow in the right direction. The best word picture I can give for this is like a newly planted tree, where you take 2 cords and you string them out to the outside so that it helps nurture the tree to grow straight. Those 2 cords are really important, mother and father, you see. And those are the things that you and I are supposed to use in our life, or the influence that we have in our lives, to help people or help our children grow in a right way that they are pleasing to God and not necessarily to us. Now, this is where I'm going to skate on some thin ice, but I've been there before, so here it goes. Again, a phrase that has come through my life here recently, and maybe even before that, but more importantly, that I've really just been paying attention to, and that's just listening to people, and this is the phrase. I've lived my life to please my parents. And I'm not talking about people that are in their 20s. I'm talking about sometimes people that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. That are talking about at this stage of their life that they recognize that what they've been doing is they have been living for their parents. Now, parents, I want you to hear this, because this is an incredible balancing act that I think all of us need to understand. What God wants us to do is to help that child discover what their gifts, their passions, and whatever else they have, and that they might choose to do those things that they really want to do. And not do the things that we want them to do, and for us to live vicariously through them. As a matter of fact, I would suggest to your thinking that this whole idea of predestination, and if you're here and you don't know what that is, you're probably better off. But the idea of it is, behind that, is that when you look at that carefully, and this is in my opinion, that when you look at those statements about predestination, it's more about the character of what Jesus wants in a person's life than what their career is going to be. And often what children feel like is they find themselves doing something, not necessarily because they have a passion for it, but simply because they feel like this would please their parents. There's a gal by the name of Carly Farina. Ever heard of Carly? You can vote in this church. You can raise your hand if you haven't heard of Carly. Carly was the CEO of Hewlett-Packard. And if you'll remember, she took Hewlett-Packard through a real restructuring stage, and then at the end of that restructuring stage, and about 5 years into it, she got fired and made a lot of headlines. Well, she's got a book out called Hard Choices, and it's a fabulous read. Maybe it's just because of where I am, but it's something that just really tags me. Have you ever picked up a book and you just go, oh, every page is for me? And that's where this book is. And she gave this, and I got to set it up, she gave this illustration about her life. She had gone through Stanford with honors and graduated, and her mom and dad wanted her to become a lawyer. And she was just terribly unhappy at UCLA. And while she's there, this is what she writes. I came home one weekend to visit. I was in turmoil. As dramatic as it sounds, it really is the case that I had an epiphany while taking a shower on a Sunday morning. My body had been trying to tell me something with all those months of headaches. I can still picture the exact tile in the shower that I was staring at when suddenly I realized I had no idea why I was in law school at all. At 22, at that moment, it finally dawned on me that my life couldn't be about pleasing my parents. If I was to use all of my capabilities and all of my gifts, if I was to make something of myself, then I had to find something that challenged my mind and captured my heart. My life was my own. I could do what I wanted. My headache disappeared. So I got out of the shower and prepared to disappoint my parents. And all I'm trying to say in this, friends, sometimes you and I can put such restraints upon our children simply because it's our desire for them. Not necessarily what God even wants. But we place upon them restraints. And God is saying, I have given to you as parents the awesome job, probably the hardest job on the planet, to nurture your kids and help them discover what their passions and their heart is. You still love me? Okay.